These are the 10 best legends to solo queue with in Apex during Season 14. Starting off the list at number 10 is Octane. Octane provides limited value for his team these days due to his jump pad no longer being in the meta. I mean, sure, at times, yes, it'll help out your squad, but it's not as useful as some of the other mobility ultimates in the game currently. With that said, Octane's stim, passive, and ultimate are fairly decent for a player who is solo queuing. You can be really aggressive with this legend in pubs if you want to be, because you have a whole kit that centers around moving faster and clearing larger distances. This is especially handy if you have to make a move on either the offensive or defensive end, and his passive can help you catch up to enemies who are low and trying to escape from you, or it can help you off drop when you have to grab more loot quickly. Just be mindful of spamming his tactical, as you're going to lose 20 HP every time you do that, and this can really affect the outcome of a fight for you if you're going in lower than you really need to be. A lot of Octanes are not mindful of how far ahead they get from their teammates due to how much faster they get to move. This can wind up creating some bad habits for you if you're going to play Octane a lot, but by and far he's a pretty fun legend to play and he's really straightforward. If you're playing on mouse and keyboard, you can learn to tap strafe on his jump pad, and that will create a layer of unpredictability when you go up against some of your opponents. Number 9 on the solo queue list is Ashe. Ashe's ultimate will provide a ton of value for her and her teammates if they act quick. The one-way portal is great at taking an aggressive angle on a team or for a quick reposition away from a team. It also has a pretty short cooldown, which allows for it to be used frequently during a match. Some people think that because it doesn't go very far, that it's not that useful. And I think this is a misconception, mainly because this ability is for more of a micro level of repositioning. A strong map awareness is critical for using this ability. Her passive is also very helpful in guiding your team's next move. Knowing where death boxes are on the map tells you a lot of information. This can help you find more fights if you want to be more aggressive, or it can help you avoid hectic choke points where you know enemies are at. Her tactical isn't amazing, but it's definitely a solid asset to have during 1v1s with your enemies. Learn to time the arc snare right and use that brief window where their movement is hindered and capitalize on it. Number 8, Bloodhound. Bloodhound isn't a mobility legend really at all, but they are a recon legend that provides so much value to their teammates. The scans help yourself and your whole team out when you're taking a fight or just trying to understand your surroundings better. This info doesn't need to be communicated, which I think is extremely helpful, because often while you solo queue, most randoms will not use their voice chat. So having an ability that can sort of bridge the gap for the lack of communication that goes on can be huge when taking fights. I mean, obviously having some voice communication is ideal, but we all know what it's like solo queuing. But here's Bloodhound's biggest downside. If you're completely solo in a game, they are not that good. The scan will give you info, sure, but it will also give away your general vicinity to your enemies. If you don't act quick off of that scan, they're gonna think something's strange there. Most people don't want to draw too much attention to them if they're trying to rat for placement in a ranked match. Bloodhound's ultimate gives you way more scans, but it also gives you a 30% speed boost, which is helpful if you're fighting, and occasionally can be used to run for your life if need be. But this also isn't great if you're alone and trying to keep it low key. The loud roar that Bloodhound lets out will give away your location to anybody nearby. I know some people thought that this list might be filled with all of the movement legends, but that isn't the case, because I solo queue about 75% of the time, and sometimes you need to provide value in other ways. It's not always about, oh, do I have a getaway if my teammates throw here? No, you still want to look to provide value in other ways, and often if you're solo queuing in ranked, you definitely have to consider what role you're filling in there. Number 7 on the list is Newcastle. Now, some of you may think I'm crazy for putting a support legend like Newcastle on this list, but the reality is sometimes the support role is needed too, and that applies even when you're playing with randoms. If your teammates get knocked, Newcastle has the best revive animation in the game currently, and that can help your team reset during moments where the tide really shifts in the enemy's favor. Even if your teammates are dead and have left the game, his tactical is very handy for cover on the fly. This can help you close the gap, and it can aid you in a quick escape. But the main reason for Newcastle's placement on this list is his ultimate. It does have some mobility that other support legends just don't have. Now, obviously, this ability is better when you try to use it to attach to a teammate that is down or a teammate that is in some trouble but separated from you. But it can still work pretty good if you're on your own. All in all, this legend is great if you feel like your team needs a support legend. I think of Newcastle being better if you're solo queuing ranked, more so than your average pubs where it's very common for teammates to dip out as soon as they get knocked. Number 6 on the list is Bangalore. Now, I put Bang pretty low on my tier list when I made one for Season 14, but overall when it comes to solo queuing, she's a pretty good pick. Her passive is incredibly helpful for that speed boost in 1v1s, or if you need to quickly break away and seek some safety. It can be pretty difficult to catch up to a Bangalore if her passive keeps being set off. Bangalore's smoke grenade is pretty clutch for moments where she needs to break line of sight off from her enemy's gunfire, and this can also work in an offensive or defensive manner, but just be mindful of not smoking your teammates and disorienting them when they clearly don't want that. Her ultimate is great at denying area, but also really strong for third parties. See, these missiles are fairly easy to avoid if there's nothing else going on around you. But if that team is already preoccupied with fighting someone else and they have to decide, do I try to avoid these missiles or do I avoid the gunfire? They may just tank some of the missile damage, giving you an opening to clean up that fight. The stunning and blurring effects from her ultimate are pretty OP for a few seconds, so look to capitalize on that if you can. Coming in at number 5 on the list is Pathfinder. Ah man, this legend could certainly be number 1 on this list if one small change was made to him. But it's been like 6 seasons since he's been touched, so I'm not gonna hold my breath. For anyone who's unaware, it's his hitbox. It's ridiculously big and winds up getting him killed quicker than really any other legend in the game. But with that said, his grapple is the most fun ability to use in the entire game, particularly when you learn the intricacies of how it actually works. You can finesse and finagle ways that no other legend can, and obviously since it only moves him, it's great for a player who is solo queuing. His zipline is decent at times when you and your mates need to take height, or if you guys need to get out of zone faster or something like that. But if you're solo queuing pubs, Pathfinder is an excellent option, especially if you want to learn to be more aggressive. For ranked, however, I don't think he's that great of an option. Of course, it's going to depend on what elo you're in, but this legend provides limited value for their teammates, and good teams will have better aim, so that means Pathfinder will be getting deleted very quickly. His passive also needs some love, but it's his hitbox that is more of a problem these days. Number 4 on this list is Seer. Despite this legend having 0 mobility, his whole kit centers around knowing more about your surroundings, and this translates well if you're solo queuing. Right now, Seer is the most overpowered legend in the entire game. His ultimate is on a 2-minute cooldown, and massively helps your whole team know every move your enemy makes. His passive and tactical are so intense to deal with that it creates severe advantages for your team where you otherwise would just not have them. If you're solo queuing ranked and your teammates are not picking a recon legend, Seer is incredibly helpful in every way. If your teammates die and leave on you, well, you have a ton of info at your disposal to decide where you want to go or where you want to avoid. Trying to rat for placement with Seer is pretty easy to do so, as long as you don't get spotted by another Seer yourself. But while you're waiting for that perfect moment to strike as you third party the last 2 teams fighting, you can know exactly where they're at and potentially even cancel a revive with his tactical. Hopefully this legend gets nerfed, but until then, he's going to be very high up on every tier list. Now we're getting into the top 3 legends to solo queue with this season. And number 3, I have Valkyrie. Now when I put Valkyrie in S tier for my season 14 tier list, I got a good amount of pushback because most of you were saying she's no longer meta and that she belongs in A or B tier. But there's no denying that this legend is still very strong. Yeah, not as strong as she once was, but still extremely viable. Her jetpack is what makes her most suitable for solo queuing. The ability to fly around during combat is such a strong asset to have. This means that when you need to be more aggressive, you can be, but also if you need to escape because you're trying to get some placement in a ranked match, you can do that as well. Her ultimate is still amazing at large scale rotations and navigating her team as a whole. And obviously this ability will still work well if you're stuck on your own in a match. Not to mention she has the ability to scan beacons and see where other enemies are when she's flying in the air. Number 2 is going to be Horizon. Now she's definitely re-emerged as a top pick in season 14 despite her ultimate getting nerfed. She's the only legend in the whole entire game to have a tactical that navigates her whole team. This gravity lift will come in handy just about everywhere once you learn how to master it. Of course, once again, it's not as good as it was when she was first released, but it's still really frustrating to go up against in the hands of a good player. Couple this with her passive and you have a legend that just feels so smooth in this game. I mean, even if you have like no movement at all, using Horizon makes you feel like you're cracked with movement. It's just how it works. But seriously, all in all, this legend is solid for solo queuing. If you learn to place her ultimate in the right spot and at the right time with some grenades, you can instantly tilt the fight into your favor. Now, the number 1 legend to solo queue with, in my opinion, is Wraith. Why? Because her phase and portal provide a ton of outplay if you are truly stuck solo in a match. But even if you are completely without teammates, these abilities can help navigate the team too. I mean, how many times have you played with randoms and it's like, guys, we need to make a play, whether that's rotating, closing the gap to your enemy, or just a quick getaway. Well, having these abilities in your control are a huge game changer if you feel like something needs to be facilitated. And I know some Wraith players see Wraith as obsolete these days, but she has a huge skill gap now, more so than she did in the early days. It's not a get out of jail free card like maybe it was in the early seasons, but still, there's a reason why a lot of players who solo queue and sweat are using Wraith. I'm sure you guys see the trend. Any legend with a repositioning tool is huge for solo queuing, but also any legend that can provide an immense amount of value to their teammates is crucial too. So now you know which legend to run, but it won't do you any good unless you check out these 10 mistakes that nearly every player makes at one time or another. I covered it all in this video here. Check it out next. Peace.